We are here. We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today.
What is up? We are back with another episode of the Fantasy Football Advice. The Fantasy Football Funhouse on the Fantasy Football Advice Network, powered by the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. This is episode 9 of this incredible series, and I wanted to thank everybody that watches me and my dad every Saturday morning. Now let's get this show on the road.
All right, welcome back to our Fundamentals of Fantasy Football series. And if you're ready to power up your fantasy knowledge, you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to explore some key terms that will help you navigate this wild world of fantasy football, all while mixing in a bit of our superhero and villain fun to keep things exciting. So grab your cape, put on your mask, and let's dive into the Fantasy Football Dictionary from A to G style. Let's go, Mason.
Okay, so A stands for two things. The first one is ADP, average draft position. Think of ADP as your superpower, like X-ray vision that helps you see where players are being selected in drafts. It tells you which player are expected to be top picks, giving you the upper hand when it's your turn. Like any superhero, you need to be prepared. Use ADP to spot the top-tier Avengers before your rivals do. And the second A is auction draft. Imagine this as a bidding war between the heroes and villains of fantasy football. In an auction draft, you have a budget, and you bid on players to build your team. Whether you're aiming for the Iron Man of running backs or the Thor of wide receivers, this draft style is all about strategy and resource management. Highest bid wins. Just don't let your competition outbid you on Superman.
Yeah, no kidding. So bench players. So B, we're getting into the B's now. So bench players. These players are like your sidekicks. They're on your team, but they aren't starting in action just yet. They'll get you points from them unless you call them into the fight in the fantasy football battle. Think of your bench players as the Robins of your squad, waiting for their moment to shine. Now, the next B is a breakout. A breakout player is like a Spider-Man, someone who rises from the shadows to take the league by storm. Maybe they weren't on your radar last season, but now they're supercharged and their performances are skyrocketing. Keep an eye on these players. They're your future MVPs. Now, what do you got next for us, Mace?
Boomer bust. This is the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of fantasy football. 1 week, they're Captain Marvel, putting up huge numbers. The next week, the Joker, a complete dud. They're high risk, high reward, and you never know which version will show up. Are you ready to roll the dice?
Maybe.
B, bust. The Lex Luthor of your team. This player fails to live up to the hype. They could have gotten injured, have been suspended, or simply just suck and don't perform. Don't let them drag your team down. Keep an eye on these potential kryptonite players to avoid a major disaster.
Now, bye weeks. Even the mightiest heroes need a break, and a bye week is when an NFL team isn't playing that week. Your players are off, but that doesn't mean your fantasy team should rest. Make sure to prepare your backup heroes for battle ahead.
There's also playoff buys
Mm.
where you get the first bye in the playoffs because you were the best team in your division.
And there you go. Now, ceiling. This is your Superman level potential. The ceiling represents the highest possible performance a player can achieve. If a player's ceiling is high, they're capable of putting up massive points and could carry your team to victory. Can your player fly as high as Superman, or are they stuck on the ground?
The next one is your cheat sheet. It's like your utility belt, a tool that helps you rank players based on projected points. Just like Batman uses his gadgets to stay one step ahead. Your cheat sheet helps you stay prepared for the draft, ensuring you don't get caught off guard. Customize it for your league settings and make it your secret weapon.
Hmm.
Another C is commissioner, the Captain America of your league. The commissioner is responsible for maintaining the league, managing drafts, and making sure everything runs smoothly. They must be fair, honest, and always ready to take action when things get tough. Just like the true superhero leading the charge.
Yeah, those commissioners, they're the unsung heroes of fantasy football. Oftentimes not getting paid. They're just doing it because they love what they do. And yeah, I got a lot of leagues that I'm the commissioner of, and it's not easy work, but somebody's got to do it. And if you're cool and you like stepping up and being a leader, you can't play fantasy football without commissioners. So yeah, get on it. Cut, drop, or release. Sometimes a player just isn't working out, kind of like a sidekick who's fallen from grace. When you cut, drop, or release a player, you're letting them go, freeing up the space for someone else who can better contribute to your team. It's tough, but sometimes necessary to keep your roster in tip-top shape. Now, DFS, or daily fantasy sports. This is a short-term battle in the world of fantasy football. Unlike traditional leagues where you manage a team all season, DFS is all about one-day heroics. You pick your squad for a single game or week, and your points are tallied up. Think of it as a flash battle where you'll need to strategize like Iron Man in a fight to the finish.
And D is Deep League. This league is the league for true heroes. It's a deep roster with more than 12 owners and lots of players. You'll need to think like Professor X, always planning 10 steps ahead. With so many teams, finding the right talent is like recruiting for an X-Men team. There's lots of potential, but it requires careful strategy. And the other D is depth chart. The depth chart is like your team's roster. It shows who's starting and who's waiting in the wings. The starters are always like your first string Avengers, while the backups are all your second string heroes. Always know who's at the top of the chart so you can make the best fantasy football decisions.
The draft. The draft is where all the superheroes and villains of fantasy football are picked. It's your origin story, the moment where you select your team and build your fantasy squad. Are you assembling a Justice League of players, or are you going for a few high-powered Avengers to lead your team to victory? The draft is where the battle begins. Dynasty League is a league for the long haul, kind of like an epic superhero saga. You keep your entire team year after year and only draft rookies to build a powerhouse for the future. This league takes commitment, strategy, so make sure you're ready to think like Bruce Wayne, building your team over time with a long-term plan.
The next one is one of my personal favorites, FAB, Free Agent Acquisition Budget. That's a mouthful. This is like your bank of resources. You've got a set budget to spend throughout the season, bidding for players on the waiver wire. It's like your super villain auction. You'll need to outbid your rivals and pick a new talent to keep your squad strong. And when I don't have any draft picks, I use this stuff to pawn off kind of for like a rookie that I want. And it's kind of like scammy, but I like it. And the next one is FF or FFB, the shorthand for fantasy football. This is your mission, your quest, your journey into the fantasy football multiverse. Whether you're assembling the strongest roster or planning your next move, it's all about the game.
Okay, flex. So this is the wild card spot on your roster. The flex position allows you to play multiple types of players, running backs, wide receivers, and sometimes even tight ends and quarterbacks. It's like having a shape-shifted superhero who can adapt to any situation and fight in any role. Now, the next one is free agent. A lone hero, a player who's not exactly currently on a team's roster. If they're available, they're fair game. Whether you're looking for a new sidekick or a backup superhero, free agents are always there to be claimed and added to your roster.
The next one is G. Gamble, the high-risk hero. This player could either be a superstar or a villainous disaster. Players who gamble are unpredictable, but if it works out, they could be the Captain Marvel of your fantasy team. Pick wisely. And the other G is handcuff. This is your backup plan, like keeping your Robin in case your Batman gets hurt. If you have a star player, you'll want to draft their backup to protect your own team. It's a safety net, ensuring your roster doesn't crumble if your main player gets down.
Yeah. So there you have it. It's our first crack at the fantasy football dictionary. We've unlocked some key fantasy terms to help you dominate like a true superhero. Stay tuned for the next part of our 4-part series of the Dictionary in Fundamentals of Fantasy Football. Remember, every great fantasy football team needs its hero and plan to defeat the villains. So assemble your squad and get ready for action. Now, it's our next segment, folks, and we're ready for the super powered
game of the week.
Let's go. So, young fantasy football fans, to the superstar showdown, here we go. This week, we have a thrilling battle between two NFL's biggest forces, the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions. Both teams have already locked in their playoff spots, which means they're ready for action, and it's about to get supercharged and exciting. Just like the comics, the game features some of the league's top superheroes and villains, and the fantasy points flying through the air like laser beams. So grab your capes, because this week's matchup could help you soar in your fantasy leagues.
First up, we have Josh Allen, the Superman of fantasy football. Whether throwing or running for touchdowns, Allen is a must start after scoring 6 total touchdowns last week. And on the other side, Jared Goff is like the Flash, moving at lightning speed with his arm. Goff has been excellent this season, ranking high in passing yards and touchdowns. He'll need all his speed to keep up with Allen's powerful passing plays.
So let's talk about the running backs and like the dynamic duel like Knuckles and Sonic. We have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They're also considered like Batman and Robin of the fantasy football atmosphere. Montgomery, 12 rushing touchdowns, a force to be reckoned with, and Gibbs uses his speed, agility to break through defenses like a speedster. Together, they make one of the most dangerous dynamic backfields in all of the NFL. Meanwhile, on the other side, James Cook. The Bills is a solid hero, but he's still working to find his superpowers in comparison to the Lions tag team running backs. If you need a running back to score a bunch of fantasy points, look no further to David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They are superheroes to me this week.
As for the wide receivers, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions who steals the spotlight. He's like Iron Man of the receiving game, using his incredible skills and sharp routes to score big fantasy points. He's been one of the most consistent and high-scoring receivers this season, so don't be surprised if he has another incredible, awesome game. He's always open. Like, how does he do that?
I know. He's always very good. Another guy has got a similar role in his offense, and that's Khalil Shakir, kind of like the Spider-Man of fantasy, quietly a sneaky weapon in the passing game. Shakir, as a rookie, he showed flashes, but this year he's racked up 700 yards. He's ready to make a big play whenever you need him. But Amon-Ra has that edge now, but with the proven track record, he's catching up.
Finally, let's not forget about the tight ends. Dalton Kincaid for the Bills and Sam Laporta for the Lions. Both have been like a little like the Hawkeye of fantasy football. Not always the first pick, but they can make a big play when you least expect it. They're both they both were rookie tight ends, so they may not score as much points as the other positions. But if you're looking for a sleeper pick to help you in the playoffs, these two might surprise you.
Yeah, I mean, Laporta was a bigger name last year, but he's kind of fell off the cliff, but he's still a solid play moving forward, and I could see them using Dalton Kincaid a bit more. So this matchup is shaping up to be an epic battle between two superheroic teams, and there's no telling what will come out on top. So Allen's superhuman abilities, Goff's lightning fast passes, Monty and Gibbs' unstoppable power, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's catches. This is going to be a fantasy football frenzy. Whether you're a fantasy rookie or a superhero veteran, this game will give you the perfect chance to level up your fantasy skills and make your playoff dreams come true.
So, who will you pick for this team? For these teams, the superhero Bills or the villainous Lions? Either way, we know you'll be scoring big in your fantasy leagues.
So what's going on now, Mace? Where are we at now?
Heroes and villains.
Let's go.
Now, mine this week is Brian Robinson, He is set to shatter fantasy expectations against the weak New Orleans defense. With the fantasy football playoffs in full swing, every point matters. Brian Robinson is poised to be my hero this week, facing a New Orleans Saints defense that ranks 26th in the league against the run. This favorable matchup presents a prime opportunity for Robinson to exploit their weakness and rack up significant rushing yards and potentially touchdowns.
Robinson has proven to be reliable, so great on you, Mason. He's been the workhorse for the Commanders, consistently carrying the load in the running game. His ability to break tackles, gain tough yards, and contribute in the passing game makes him a valuable asset in fantasy football, and that Saints defense has been struggling to contain opposing running backs. So Robinson has the potential, and he's going to have a breakout game to solidify his status as your fantasy hero.
As the fantasy football playoffs heat up, every single point matters. With a favorable matchup against the Saints, Brian Robinson is poised to deliver a heroic performance and help fantasy managers secure a victory. His combination of talent, opportunity, and matchup make him a top fantasy football player this week.
Nice. So for me this week, my hero of the week is Rico Dowdle of the Cowboys. He's stepping in to claim that title as a fantasy hero. After weeks of building momentum, Dowdle is showing he's not just a solid backup, but a reliable starter who could deliver big-time numbers. In Week 14, even in the Cowboys' loss to the Bengals, Dowdle turned the heads with a career-high 131 rushing yards, proving he's ready for that starting role in your fantasy lineup.
Rico Dowdle has truly emerged as a fantasy football superhero over the past few weeks, and with his growing role in the Cowboys' offense, he's become an essential player for your team heading into Week 15. His consistency on the field, including his career-high 131-yard game against the Bengals, is a testament to his talent and determination.
So, fantasy numbers speak for themselves, and his eye-popping matchup against the Panthers, I am ready for Dowdle to emerge. Get ready to watch Dowdle save your fantasy season this week because he's bringing his A game to the table. Now, Mason, let's get into our villains and let's see what you got cooking up this week.
First of all, I'm going to do a very, very risky take this week. I'm telling you guys to bench Jonathan Taylor. With the fantasy football playoffs on the line, Jonathan Taylor is poised to be a villainous force for fantasy football managers. Facing a tough Denver Broncos defense ranked 6th in the league against the run, Taylor's path to fantasy success will be put into the turf.
Taylor, he once a dominant force in the league, but has struggled with injuries and inconsistent performance this season. His matchup against a stout Denver defense only exacerbates his fantasy woes. With a low ceiling, high floor, Taylor is a risky play that could derail your fantasy hopes in the playoffs.
As fantasy football managers navigate the treacherous waters of the playoffs, it's crucial to avoid pitfalls like Jonathan Taylor. His matchup against the Broncos, coupled with his inconsistent play, make him a liability rather than an asset. It's time to bench Taylor and turn to more reliable options to secure a fantasy football victory.
So my villain is Russell Wilson, and you're going to want to avoid him. He's had some moments of glory this season, don't get me wrong, including throwing multiple touchdowns in 4 of his last 7 games, but he's far from reliable. Wilson's fantasy value has been heavily dependent on his yardage and anything but consistent.
With the tough matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best defenses in the league, combined with the potential absence of his top target, George Pickens, things are lining up for Wilson to be more of a hindrance than a hero for your fantasy team. Heading into Week 15, it's time to look for a different quarterback because Wilson's performance is bound to fall short in this tough battle.
He only threw for 158 yards last week in Week 14, marking his 3rd game in the last 5, throwing for fewer than 210 passing yards. The Philly defense, like Mason mentioned, is tough, only allowing 14 passing touchdowns this season, tied for 5th fewest in the league. Pickens, his most reliable target, is not playing, and we know that what that means is going to be lower scoring. So with 2 touchdowns in Week 14, he still struggled to find his yardage. He's a low-end QB2 this week with his passing yardage. So, I'm not going with Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson is the ultimate fantasy football villain for Week 15. With a daunting matchup against the Eagles and his inconsistency in both yardage and scoring, starting him this week is a gamble you don't need to take.
Yeah. Between his shaky performance, lack of top targets, Wilson is poised to disappoint. So don't let him sabotage your lineup. Keep Wilson on the bench and avoid that villainous wrath. Now, Mason, top 5 series. What do we got this week?
Cereals.
Okay, what's your favorite cereals? I'll let you do all 5 of yours.
Okay, my number 5 is Lucky Charms. It's just really good, and I like it. My number 4 is Count Chocolate. It's like a chocolate version of Lucky Charms. It's amazing, and my dad brought me back some from the States, and it was his favorite cereal when he was a kid. My number 3 is the special limited edition Elf on the Shelf cereal. It's like Lucky Charms, but the marshmallows are smaller, but the grams, they're actually flavored. They're vanilla flavored. My number 2 is the Oreo cereal. They're like Oreo loops. They're absolutely incredible. And my number 1 is the Tim Hortons birthday cake cereal. They like crunch the roof of your mouth, and I love them, and I can eat an entire box of them.
Cool, man. Yeah. For me, I'm kind of an old man, so my favorite cereals are kind of like the generic cornflakes, Harvest Crunch granola. I'll dip into some Lucky Charms and some Rice Krispies, and I do like my Count Chocolate.
You love Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah, I do like Honey Nut Cheerios too. But yeah, I like all kinds of cereal. But yeah, that's it, folks, for the Fantasy Football Funhouse, powered by the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Remember, folks, get your merch 20% off and free shipping on orders over $99. It is a great place to get your Christmas presents set up, your holiday gifts. Let's go. Now, everybody, remember, we're headed into the playoffs here. It's all in good fun.
Playoffs.
Yeah, it's the playoffs now. Week 1 is in full swing here. Let's go. Let's win some championships. Let's have some fun. That's most important. And what do we say to Mason, to all our viewers at the end of each show?
We hope you win.
We hope you win, folks, and have a good weekend. Peace.